The silence in the grand hall of Stirling Manor was heavy enough to crush a man's soul. Lord Archibald Stirling stood trembling, his debts looming over him like an executioner's blade. He gestured frantically to the woman in the silk blue gown, a vision of perfection, with golden curls and sapphire eyes. "Take the pretty one, your grace," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. "Isabella is the jewel of the county. She is yours." Duke Sebastian Thorne, the man they whispered, was more wolf than human, slowly turned his cold, grey gaze away from the beauty. He looked past the silk, past the jewels, into the shadows where a girl in a grey, stained apron was trying to make herself invisible. He walked past the trembling father, past the shocked beauty, and stopped in front of the rejected sister. "I have no need for a jewel that shines only when polished," he said, his voice deep and vibrating with authority. "I will take the one who holds the house together." London, autumn of 1884. The Stirling family name had once meant something. It had meant lands that stretched as far as the River Thames and coffers filled with gold from the East India Company. But under the stewardship of Lord Archibald Stirling, a man who possessed a taste for gambling that far exceeded his talent for it, the legacy had crumbled. By the time the leaves began to turn brown in October, the Stirling fortune was nothing more than smoke. Archibald sat in his study, the mahogany desk cluttered with final notices. He poured himself a glass of brandy, his hand shaking so violently the amber liquid sloshed onto the leather. He was a ruined man. There was only one card left to play, and he had been polishing it for 18 years. "Isabella," he muttered to himself, looking at the portrait of his eldest daughter hanging above the fireplace. She was breathtaking. Even in oil paint, her beauty was undeniable. She was his salvation. He rang the bell for the servants. A moment later, the heavy oak door creaked open. It wasn't the butler, but a young woman wiping her hands on a rag. She wore a simple dress of charcoal wool, frayed at the hem, and her dark hair was pulled back severely, though stray tendrils escaped to frame a face that was striking, if not classically soft. "Father," Elara asked, her voice calm. "Hudson has left. He said he hadn't been paid in 3 months. I've been trying to manage the accounts, but—" "Quiet, girl," Archibald snapped, not even looking at her. Elara was the mistake. The second daughter. The one who looked too much like his late wife's spirited, argumentative mother. She had no dowry, no charm, and a sharp tongue that frightened away suitors. "Where is your sister?" "Isabella is resting. She said the fitting for her new gown exhausted her." "Good. Let her rest. She must be perfect for tomorrow." Archibald stood up, pacing the room. "He is coming, Elara. The Wolf of Westbury." Elara went still. "Duke Sebastian Thorne? The man is a recluse. They say he threw the last marriage broker out of a second-story window." "He is the wealthiest man in England," Archibald hissed, "and he is looking for a wife, not for love, but for an heir, a business transaction. I have arranged a viewing. He will see Isabella, he will be struck by her beauty, he will pay off my debts, and he will take her away. It is a foolproof plan." Elara looked down at the ledger in her hands. She knew the reality her father refused to see. The Wolf of Westbury didn't care for beauty. He was an industrialist, a man of steel and steam who had built an empire from the ground up after his own father gambled it away. He was ruthless. "And if he refuses?" Elara asked softly. "He won't." Archibald slammed his hand on the desk. "Now get out of my sight. Go to the kitchens. Make sure the dinner is edible. And stay hidden. I don't want him to see you and think our bloodline produces runts." Elara didn't flinch. She was used to the cruelty. It was the armor she wore every day. "Yes, father." She left the study, her mind already racing. The accounts showed they had enough coal for 2 days and enough food for a week. If the Duke didn't sign a contract, they would be on the street. She didn't care for herself. She could work. She could teach. But Isabella was helpless. She had been raised to be a decorative object, incapable of boiling water without scalding herself. The next evening, the carriage arrived. It was black, devoid of crests or ornamentation, drawn by 4 massive black stallions. The rain lashed against the cobblestones as Duke Sebastian Thorne stepped out. He was a giant of a man. Standing well over 6 feet, he wore a heavy greatcoat that seemed to swallow the light. He didn't carry a cane or wear a hat. His hair was dark, kept short in a military style, and a scar ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent expression of skepticism. Archibald was waiting at the door, bowing so low he nearly toppled over. "Your Grace, welcome to Stirling Manor. We are honored, truly honored." Sebastian ignored the pleasantries. He walked into the foyer, peeling off his gloves with slow, deliberate movements. "Lord Stirling, you stated in your letter that you had a proposition that would be worth my time. I am a busy man. My factories do not run themselves." Yes, of course. A proposition of the utmost value." Archibald signalled frantically to the stairs. Music began to play. A harp, hired for the last of their coins. Isabella descended. She was truly a masterpiece. She wore a gown of pale blue silk that Elara had spent 3 nights stitching because they couldn't afford a seamstress. Her hair was a cascade of gold, and her smile was practiced perfection. "Your Grace," Isabella curtsied, her voice breathless and airy. Sebastian looked at her. His expression didn't change. He looked at her the way a man looks at a vase he is considering buying for a hallway he rarely visits. "Lady Isabella," he said flatly. "Dinner is served," Archibald announced, clapping his hands. The dining room was dimly lit, mostly to hide the peeling wallpaper and the empty spots where paintings had been sold off. Elara was in the kitchen, plating the roasted pheasant. She had cooked it herself, seasoned with herbs she grew in the small garden patch she tended. "Is it ready?" she whispered to the hired server, a local boy named Thomas. "Yes, Miss Elara, but the Duke looks terrifying. He hasn't said a word." "Just serve the wine, don't spill it." Elara moved to the service door, leaving it cracked open just an inch. She needed to hear. She needed to know if her sister was safe, or if this wolf was going to devour them all. Dinner was a disaster, disguised as a banquet. Lord Archibald chattered incessantly about the weather, the temporary state of the economy, and the impeccable lineage of the Stirling family. Isabella sat straight-backed, smiling vacantly, occasionally adding, "Oh yes, father," or "How fascinating." Duke Sebastian Thorne ate in silence. He cut his meat with surgical precision. Finally, he put his fork down. "Lord Stirling," Sebastian interrupted a monologue about fox hunting. "You are currently £150,000 in debt to the Royal Bank and another 50,000 to private lenders. Your estate is mortgaged thrice over. You have sold the family silver, the livestock, and I believe the painting that used to hang in the foyer is now residing in a pawn shop on Fleet Street." The silence that followed was absolute. Archibald turned pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Isabella looked confused. She had never been told the extent of their ruin. Temporary setbacks," Archibald stammered. "Investments that are about to mature." "You invested in a diamond mine, in a region known only for mud," Sebastian said dryly. "It was a fraud. Everyone in the city knew it. Except you." He took a sip of wine. He paused. He took another sip, swirling the red liquid in the glass. "However," he murmured, "this pheasant is excellent. The sauce, blackberry and thyme? A peasant combination, but executed with a sophistication I did not expect." "Our chef. From Paris," Archibald lied quickly. "You cannot afford a chef from Paris," Sebastian countered. "You cannot afford a cook from London." Suddenly, the Duke turned his head toward the service door. "You there, in the shadows. Come out!" Elara froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He had seen her. Through the crack. "I said, come out." His voice was like a whip crack. Elara pushed the door open. She stepped into the candlelight. She was still wearing her apron stained with flour and blackberry juice. Her hands were red from the heat of the stove. She kept her chin up, refusing to look ashamed. "This is—" Archibald stuttered, his face turning purple. "This is just the help. A scullery maid. Elara, leave us." "She is not a maid," Sebastian said, his eyes locking onto Elara's. "She has the sterling nose, and she is the only person in this house who seemingly knows how to produce something of value. Who are you?" "I am Elara Sterling," she said clearly. "Lord Sterling's second daughter." "The rejected one," Sebastian mused. He looked her up and down. He didn't look at her body. He looked at her hands. Rough, working hands. Then he looked at her eyes. Intelligence burned there. "Did you cook this?" he asked. "Yes, Your Grace." "And did you season it?" "I did. The pheasant was old. It needed the acid from the berries to tenderize the meat." Archibald looked ready to faint. "Your Grace, please forgive her impertinence. Look at Isabella. She plays the harp. She speaks Italian." "Say something in Italian, Isabella," Sebastian commanded, not looking away from Elara. Isabella panicked. "Pasta? Ciao?" Sebastian sighed. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He walked around the table. He stood behind Isabella, looking at her reflection in the darkened window. "She is beautiful, Archibald. You are right. She is a prize." Archibald let out a breath of relief. "Then, we have an agreement?" "She would look excellent in a portrait hall," Sebastian continued. "She would bear beautiful children who would likely have heads full of air. She would bankrupt me in a decade with her need for silks to match her eyes." He walked away from Isabella and stopped in front of Elara. He towered over her. The smell of him was rain, tobacco, and expensive soap. "You," he said to Elara, "you handle the accounts?" Elara hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." "Why did you sell the timber rights to the Southern Forest last month?" Elara blinked. How did he know that? "Because the market for oak was at a 10-year high, and we needed liquid capital to pay the interest on the primary mortgage to prevent foreclosure. If we had waited, the price would have dropped due to the imports from America." A spark lit up in Sebastian's grey eyes. It was the first time he looked interested. "Correct. And the diamond mine?" "I told my father not to invest," Elara said, her voice steady. "I researched the geology reports. They were forged. The stamp was from a surveyor who died 3 years ago." Sebastian turned to Archibald. "Your maid is smarter than you, my lord." "She is a nuisance," Archibald spat. "She is plain, she is stubborn, and she is of no consequence. Take Isabella. I will give you Isabella for the settlement of the debts. Just take her." This was the moment. The moment from the hook. Archibald grabbed Isabella's hand and thrust her forward. "Take the pretty one." Sebastian looked at the sobbing, terrified Isabella. Then he looked at Elara, who stood stoically, ready to clean up the mess, as always. "No," Sebastian said. He reached out and took Elara's rough, berry-stained hand in his gloved one. I am not looking for a decoration, Lord Stirling. I am looking for a duchess who can run an estate while I run an empire. I am looking for a partner." He pulled Elara slightly closer. The heat radiating from him was intense. "I will clear your debts," Sebastian announced, his voice ringing through the hall. "I will restore the Stirling credit. In exchange, I will take Elara." "Elara?" Archibald laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You want Elara? She's nobody. She's the one we hide." "Then you are a fool," Sebastian said coldly. He looked down at Elara. "Pack your things. You leave with me tonight." "Tonight?" Elara gasped. "I do not leave valuable assets in the hands of incompetents," he replied. "We marry by special license in 3 days. Until then, you will stay at my aunt's residence in London. Do you agree?" Elara looked at her father, who looked as if he had been slapped. She looked at Isabella, who looked relieved not to be going with the scary man. She looked at the crumbling house she had tried so hard to save. "I agree," Elara whispered. "Good." Sebastian turned to Archibald. "The debts are cleared, but never cross my path again." He led Elara out of the dining room, through the foyer, and out into the rain. He didn't offer her his arm. He simply held the door open for her. As the carriage pulled away, leaving the only home she had ever known, Elara sat opposite the Wolf of Westbury. The interior of the carriage was warm. "Why?" she asked, breaking the silence. "You don't know me." Sebastian looked at her from the shadows. "I know you are the only person in that room who wasn't afraid of me. And I know you understand the price of oak." He leaned forward, the moonlight catching the scar on his brow. "Do not mistake this for a fairy tale, Elara. I am not a prince. I am a businessman. I bought you because you are useful. Do not expect love. Do not expect romance. You will run my house, you will manage my social calendar, and you will ensure my legacy is secure. In return, you will have protection, wealth, and the freedom to use that sharp brain of yours. Is that understood?" Elara felt a chill, but also a strange thrill. He wasn't lying to her. He was offering her a job, a partnership. "Understood, Your Grace," she said. "Call me Sebastian," he said, closing his eyes. "We have a long drive ahead." But as the carriage rattled toward London, Elara didn't know that the business arrangement was about to be tested. For back at Stirling Manor, Archibald was not grateful. He was furious. He had been humiliated. And in his fury, he began to realize that if Elara was worth that much to the Duke, maybe he had sold her too cheaply. And Isabella? Isabella was staring at the empty spot where her sister had stood, a dark jealousy beginning to curl in her gut. She was supposed to be the Duchess. She was the pretty one. The drama had only just begun. If Stirling Manor was a crumbling relic of the past, Thorne House was a fortress of the future. It stood on a prominent corner in Mayfair, a blackened stone monolith that seemed to absorb the London fog. There were no flower boxes, no cheerful gas lamps, only heavy iron gates and windows that looked like unblinking eyes. The carriage stopped. Sebastian didn't wait for the footman. He kicked the door open and stepped out into the swirling mist. He turned and offered a hand to Elara. His grip was firm, impersonal. "Welcome to your new place of employment," he said, a ghost of a smirk touching his lips. Inside, the house was silent and cold. It smelled of beeswax and lemon, but beneath that, the faint, metallic scent of the master's factories, which seemed to cling to the very drapes. A line of servants stood in the foyer, rigid as soldiers. "This is Mrs. Halloway." Sebastian gestured to a severe woman in black bombazine, with a ring of keys at her waist that jingled like jailer's shackles. "She runs the house. Or rather, She maintains the status quo." Mrs. Halloway curtsied, though her eyes remained fixed on Elara's frayed coat. "My lord, we were not expecting guests." "She is not a guest," Sebastian said, stripping off his greatcoat and tossing it to a footman. "She is the future Duchess of Westbury. She will be taking over the management of the household accounts, effective immediately." A ripple of shock went through the line of staff. Mrs. Halloway's lips thinned into a white line. "My lord, with all due respect, the accounts are complex. A young lady from the country might find the London vendors challenging." "I find incompetence challenging, Mrs. Halloway," Sebastian said. He pulled a gold pocket watch from his vest. "I have a meeting at the foundry in 20 minutes. I will not be back for dinner. Elara, Mrs. Halloway will show you to your quarters. Do not get comfortable. I expect a preliminary audit of the kitchen expenses on my desk by tomorrow morning." He turned to leave, then paused. He looked back at Elara, who stood small but upright in the cavernous hall. "Swim, Elara, or sink. I do not rescue people twice." With that, the heavy front door slammed shut, leaving Elara alone with a staff that looked ready to eat her alive. "If you'll follow me, miss," Mrs. Halloway said, the title dripping with condescension. "I suppose we can find a room in the guest wing until the arrangement is formalized." "Thank you, Mrs. Halloway," Elara said, her voice calm. "But first, please bring the ledgers to the library. And tea. Strong tea." The next 6 hours were a battleground. Elara sat in the Duke's library, a room lined with books on engineering, metallurgy, and philosophy. There were no novels. She opened the household ledgers. They were a mess. Not a chaotic mess, but a carefully constructed one. "Here is your tea," a young maid whispered, trembling as she set the tray down. "Mrs. Halloway says you aren't to touch the master's papers." "What is your name?" Elara asked gently. "Daisy, miss." "Daisy, tell me, does the butcher deliver the meat himself?" "Oh, no, miss. Mr. O'Malley sends his boy. But the meat is often gristle. Mrs. Halloway says it's the best cuts available in London, but cook complains something fierce when no one is listening." Elara smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who had found tracks. "Thank you, Daisy." By the time the grandfather clock chimed midnight, Elara had found it. The phantom expenses. The front door opened. Heavy boots echoed in the hall. Sebastian walked in, smelling of smoke and rain. He looked exhausted. He loosened his cravat as he walked into the library, surprised to see the lamp still burning. Elara was slumped over the desk, ink on her fingers. She looked up, her eyes tired but sharp. "You're still up," he noted. "I found a discrepancy," Elara said, standing up and smoothing her skirts. Sebastian walked over to the desk. "Go on." "You spend £400 a month on meat," Elara pointed to a column. "For a household of 12 servants and one master who is rarely home. That is enough to feed a regiment." Sebastian frowned. "I pay the bills. I don't read them." "Mrs. Halloway does," Elara said. "She has been authorizing payments to O'Malley's Prime Cuts at 3 times the market rate. I checked the street directory. O'Malley's is owned by a man named Halloway. Her brother, I presume." Sebastian's face darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "She is stealing from me?" "She is skimming," Elara corrected. "She assumes you are too busy building trains to notice the price of beef. It's a common tactic with absentee landlords." Sebastian looked at the ledger, then at Elara. For the first time, there was genuine respect in his gaze. "What do you propose?" "I have already drafted a letter of dismissal." Elara slid a paper across the desk. "And a letter to the magistrate regarding the theft. However, if we involve the law, it will be a scandal. People will say the Wolf of Westbury cannot control his own house. And the alternative? We give her a choice. She leaves tonight, without a reference, and we keep the money she has saved in her pension fund to cover the loss. She goes quietly, or she goes to Newgate prison. Sebastian laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he hadn't used it in years. You are ruthless, Elara Sterling. I am efficient, Your Grace. Sebastian, he corrected. He picked up the pen and signed the dismissal letter. Do it. And tomorrow, buy yourself a new dress. You look like a governess. I am a governess, Elara replied, taking the paper. I am governing your life. As she walked out of the library, Sebastian watched her go. He had expected a mouse. He had bought a tiger. The wedding took place 3 days later in a small, damp chapel near the docks. It was not the wedding of the season. It was barely a wedding at all. There were no flowers. There were no guests, save for Sebastian's aunt, Lady Agatha, a woman who looked like a dried apple doll and was twice as sour, and his personal solicitor, Mr. Finch. Elara wore a dress of stiff grey silk. It was expensive but sombre. She felt less like a bride and more like she was signing a treaty. Do you, Sebastian Arthur Thorne, take this woman? The vicar droned on, clearly eager to get back to his warm fire. I do, Sebastian said. His voice was steady, devoid of emotion. And do you, Elara Marie Sterling? Stop! The shout echoed from the back of the church. The heavy doors banged open, and Lord Archibald Sterling marched in, looking dishevelled and wild-eyed. Behind him trailed a man carrying a leather satchel, a lawyer by the look of his greasy suit. Sebastian didn't turn around immediately. He sighed, a sound of profound irritation. I thought I told the footman to keep the rubbish out. You cannot marry her, Archibald shouted, marching down the aisle. The contract is void! Elara froze. Her father looked desperate. His eyes were bloodshot. Sebastian turned slowly, shielding Elara with his body. Lord Sterling, you seem to have forgotten our agreement. Your debts are paid. Your daughter is mine. I was swindled. Archibald pointed a shaking finger at Sebastian. I didn't know. I didn't know she was the one you wanted. You tricked me into giving away the most valuable asset of Stirling Manor for a pittance. Asset? Elara whispered. Is that all I am? You shut up, Archibald snapped at her. You ungrateful, wretched girl. You knew the timber prices. You knew about the bonds. You let me think you were worthless, so I would sell you off. He turned to the vicar. This woman is mentally unfit. She is coerced. And furthermore, as her legal guardian, I revoke my consent unless the dowry price is renegotiated. I want £50,000 more in cash, or I take her back right now. It was extortion, pure and simple. Archibald had realized that without Elara, he couldn't run the estate even with his debts paid. He would be ruined again in a month. He needed her brain, or he needed enough money to never worry again. Sebastian stepped forward. He towered over the older man. The wolf was surfacing. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You are trying to sell your daughter to me. Again? Sebastian asked, his voice dangerously low. I am demanding fair market value, Archibald squeaked, stepping back. She is not a horse, Archibald. She is my property. I am not. The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Elara stepped out from behind Sebastian. She was trembling, not with fear, but with a lifetime of suppressed rage. I am not your property, father, she said, walking toward him. I was your daughter. I was your servant. I was your accountant. I kept the roof over your head while you gambled away mother's jewelry. I cooked your meals while you called me plain and useless. She stopped inches from him. You sold me, she said, her voice shaking. You stood in that hall and said, take the pretty one. You offered Isabella because you thought I was nothing. You don't get to value me now just because someone else sees my worth. You will come home. Archibald grabbed her wrist. Now! Sebastian moved. It was a blur of motion. One moment he was standing by the altar. The next, his hand was wrapped around Archibald's wrist, crushing the bones until the older man shrieked and let go of Elara. "Touch my wife again," Sebastian whispered, "and you will lose the hand." He shoved Archibald back. The lawyer scrambled away, dropping his papers. "Mr. Finch!" Sebastian called out, without looking away from Archibald. "Yes, Your Grace," the solicitor piped up. "Draft a restraining order. If Lord Stirling comes within 10 miles of my London residence or my country estate, he is to be arrested for trespassing and attempted extortion. And send a telegram to the bank. The payment for his debts, freeze it." "No," Archibald gasped. "You can't. The creditors will take the manor tomorrow." "Then I suggest you start packing," Sebastian said coldly. "Get out!" Archibald looked at Elara, pleading now. "Elara, please, tell him. I'm your father." Elara looked at the man who had never loved her. She looked at Sebastian, the stranger who was defending her. "I have no father," Elara said softly. "I am a thorn now." Archibald let out a sob of defeat and fled to the church, the lawyer scuttling after him. The silence returned to the chapel. "Shall we continue?" Sebastian asked the vicar, as if he had just swatted a fly. The vicar, pale and sweating, nodded. Yes." "Do you, Elara?" "I do," Elara said firmly. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Sebastian turned to her. He didn't kiss her. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. It was a courtly gesture, but his eyes held a fire she hadn't seen before. "You handled yourself well," he murmured. "I had a good example," she replied. They walked out into the grey London afternoon, but as they entered the carriage, the reality of the situation settled in. They were married, they were strangers, and they had just declared war on her family. The ride back to Thorne House was quiet. When they arrived, the staff was lined up again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Mrs. Halloway was gone. The air felt lighter. "Dinner in the private dining room," Sebastian ordered the new housekeeper. "Just the two of us." That night, for the first time, they sat across from each other, not as master and potential servant, but as equals. "Why did you do that?" Elara asked, cutting into a roast lamb. "Freeze the payments? You promised to pay his debts." "I promised to pay for a contract he honored," Sebastian said, pouring wine. "He tried to breach it. I do not reward treachery. He will be homeless. He is a grown man. He will survive, or he won't." Sebastian looked at her intently. "Does it bother you?" Elara thought about it. She thought about the years of neglect, the cold attic room she slept in while Isabella had the suite. "No," she admitted. "It feels like justice." Sebastian raised his glass. "To justice. To justice," she echoed. "I have a gift for you," Sebastian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elara opened it. Inside lay a key. It was heavy, made of iron, with the thorn crest, a wolf's head, embossed on it. "It is not jewelry," Sebastian explained. "It is the master key to the Westbury factories. I have an office prepared for you next to mine. If you can find phantom expenses in a kitchen ledger, I want to see what you can find in my supply chain." Elara's heart skipped a beat. A diamond necklace would have been cold comfort. This was power. This was trust. "I start tomorrow," she said, clutching the key. "Good," Sebastian smiled, a real smile this time. "Because the sharks are circling Elara. My competitors know I have taken a wife. They will think I am distracted. They will try to strike. I need you to be my shield." "I will be your shield," she promised. But they didn't know that the strike wouldn't come from a competitor. It would come from the one person they had forgotten. Back in the countryside, in a carriage filled with trunks, Isabella sat weeping. They were being evicted. Her father was ruining everything. But as she cried, a thought took root. Elara had stolen her life. Elara, the plain one. Isabella wiped her eyes. She wasn't smart like Elara, but she was beautiful, and she knew that in London, beauty was a currency more powerful than coal. "Driver," Isabella called out, "take us to London, to Lady Pembroke's house. She always said I should meet her son." The rejected sister had won the battle, but the pretty one was preparing for war. For 2 months, Elara lived a life she had never dared to dream of. By day, she sat in an office of glass, and steel at the heart of the Westbury ironworks, her fingers stained with ink, her mind wrestling with supply chains and shipping manifests. She was good at it, brilliant even. The foremen, gruff men with coal dust in their beards, who had initially scoffed at taking orders from a skirt, now tipped their caps with genuine respect when she walked the floor. She had streamlined the coal delivery, saving the company 10%, and renegotiated the steel contracts with the French, saving another 15%. Sebastian watched her with a burning intensity. Their evenings were spent debating politics and philosophy over brandy, Elara having discovered a taste for it. It was a marriage of minds, but physically, there was still a distance. Sebastian treated her like a precious, fragile ally. He admired her, he protected her, but he held back, afraid perhaps that the beast inside him, the wolf the papers wrote about, would frighten her away. But the peace of the factory was about to be shattered by the warfare of the ballroom. The occasion was the Lord Mayor's Winter Gala. It was the event of the season, a mandatory appearance for the Duke of Westbury. "I'd rather inspect a sewer," Sebastian grumbled, as his valet adjusted his white tie. Elara laughed, standing before the mirror. She wore a gown of deep midnight velvet, devoid of frills. Around her neck sat the heavy Westbury emeralds, stones so large they felt like a burden. She looked regal, severe, and powerful, but she didn't look pretty. "We go, we dance one waltz, we intimidate the railway minister, and we leave," Elara summarized the plan. "Perfect." Sebastian offered her his arm. When they arrived at the assembly rooms, the air changed. The chatter didn't stop. It just lowered to a buzzing frequency. Eyes turned. Lorgnettes were raised. Elara held her head high, gripping Sebastian's arm. She felt his muscles tense. They moved through the crowd like a dreadnought cutting through waves. But then the crowd parted near the orchestra. Standing there, bathed in the light of the crystal chandelier, was a vision in white lace and pearls. Golden hair piled high, blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears, a smile that was both brave and tragic. "Isabella," Elara breathed. Her sister saw them. The room went silent. Isabella didn't scream. She didn't scowl. She did something far more dangerous. She curtsied, low and trembling, looking up at Sebastian with the eyes of a wounded fawn. "Your Grace," she whispered, loud enough for the inner circle to hear. "And, Elara, I am so relieved to see you well." She turned to the woman beside her, Lady Pembroke, a notorious gossip with a beak like a hawk. "I was so worried, Lady Pembroke. After the incident, I feared Elara had been forced into seclusion. But look, she is wearing the emeralds. She has survived." The implication was subtle but venomous. Forced. Survived. As if Elara were a prisoner or a usurper who had stolen the jewels. "I am quite well, Isabella," Elara said, her voice cool. "And I see you have found a patroness." "Lady Pembroke has been a saint," Isabella sighed, touching the older woman's arm. "She took me in when I was cast out, when we lost everything." Whispers rippled through the room. Cast out. The Duke ruined her father. He took the plain sister and threw the beauty into the street. "Why?" "Because the plain one is a witch," a voice murmured behind a fan. "Because she tricked him," another whispered. "Look at her. She looks like a schoolmistress. He can't possibly desire her." Sebastian stepped forward, his presence darkening the mood. "Isabella, I trust your father is adjusting." Isabella flinched, as if he had raised a hand. "He's broken, Your Grace. But I forgive you. I know you are a hard man. And I know Elara. She has always been ambitious. She always wanted what was mine." It was a masterstroke of manipulation. In 3 sentences, Isabella had painted herself as the martyr, Sebastian as the brute, and Elara as the jealous schemer who had orchestrated her family's downfall to steal a title. Sebastian opened his mouth to roar, to destroy her with words, but Elara squeezed his arm. "Don't," her grip said. "If you attack her, you prove her right." "We are here to dance," Elara said loudly. "Come, Sebastian." She dragged him onto the floor. The music started. They spun. "She is poisoning them against you," Sebastian growled, spinning her violently. "Let her talk," Elara said, though her heart was stinging. "Truth is steel, Sebastian. Rumors are just rust. They can be scrubbed away." But as the night went on, the rust spread. Men Elara had done business with, bankers, suppliers, avoided her gaze. Their wives turned their backs. Isabella was holding court in the corner, surrounded by admirers, including Lord Harrington, Sebastian's fiercest rival in the steel trade. Harrington, a slim man with a waxed moustache and eyes like a rat, was listening to Isabella intently. He looked at Elara, then at Sebastian, and a cruel smile played on his lips. "Your sister is charming," Harrington said, intercepting Elara near the punch bowl, while Sebastian was momentarily cornered by the minister. "She is an actress, Lord Harrington," Elara replied. "Do not mistake the performance for the person." "Perhaps," Harrington sipped his punch, "but she tells a compelling story. She says you have the Duke's ear on business matters, that you whisper in his sleep. I speak to him in the daylight, just as I speak to you." "A woman running the Westbury Empire," Harrington chuckled. "It makes the investors nervous, Duchess. They like stability. They like tradition. If word gets out that the Wolf is being led on a leash by a, forgive me, plain little accountant, the stock prices might tumble." "The stock is at an all-time high," Elara snapped. "For now," Harrington tipped his glass. "But iron is brittle when it gets too cold, and it is a very cold winter." He walked away, offering his arm to Isabella. Isabella looked back at Elara and smiled. It wasn't a sweet smile. It was a declaration of war. Elara felt a sudden chill. This wasn't just social climbing. Isabella was feeding information to Harrington. Personal information. "We need to leave," Elara found Sebastian. "Now." "What is it?" "It's a trap," she whispered. "Isabella isn't just trying to humiliate me. She's distracting us." They left the ball, the sound of laughter following them out into the foggy night. But the true horror wasn't in the ballroom. It was waiting for them in the morning papers. The next day, the scandal sheets ran the headline, "The Beast and the Shrew. How the rejected daughter stole the Duke's fortune." It was humiliating. But Elara didn't have time to cry. Because 2 hours after the papers hit the street, The telegraph in Sebastian's study began to click frantically. Explosion! The word hung in the air of the study, heavier than smoke. Sebastian read the telegram, his face turning ashen. It's the foundry, the main boiler. Level 4. Level 4? Elara stood up, knocking her chair over. That's where the new high-pressure prototypes are. That sector is restricted. How could the boiler explode? I don't know. Sebastian was already moving, grabbing his heavy coat. But there are men inside. 50 men. I'm coming with you, Elara said. No. Sebastian turned, his hands grabbing her shoulders. It's dangerous. There could be secondary blasts. You stay here. Manage the telegraphs. Coordinate the hospitals. Sebastian! Elara, please! His voice cracked. It was the first time she had heard fear in his voice. If something happens to me, you are the only one who knows the codes. You are the only one who can save the company. I cannot risk you. He kissed her. It was hard, desperate, and brief. Then he was gone. Elara stood in the silent house for 1 minute. She looked at the telegraph machine. She looked at the iron key he had given her, hanging on a chain around her neck. Manage the telegraphs? She whispered. Not likely. She ran upstairs, tore off her heavy skirts, and threw on a pair of Sebastian's old trousers and a rough tunic. Scandalous attire for a duchess, but necessary for a war zone. She grabbed the key, ran to the stables, and saddled a horse herself. She rode hard toward the east end, the sky ahead already stained black and orange with smoke. When she arrived at the Westbury Ironworks, it was chaos. The massive iron gates were twisted. Flames licked the night sky. Women were screaming, trying to get to the gates to find their husbands. The foremen were shouting orders that no one could hear over the roar of the fire. Elara slid off her horse and pushed through the crowd. "Make way!" she shouted. "Make way! Get back, miss!" A policeman tried to stop her. "I'm the Duchess of Westbury," Elara yelled, shoving him aside. "Where is the Duke?" The foreman, a burly man named McGregor, saw her. His face was streaked with soot and blood. "Your Grace, you shouldn't be here." "Where is he, McGregor?" "He went in." McGregor pointed to the inferno of the main warehouse. The roof on Sector 4 collapsed. There were lads trapped. The Duke, he put a wet rag over his face and went in with the rescue team. That was 20 minutes ago. Elara's heart stopped. 20 minutes in that heat? "The structure is unstable," McGregor yelled. "We can't send anyone else in." "The water pumps." Elara looked at the massive holding tanks. "Why aren't the pumps running?" "The valves are jammed. The pressure is too high. We can't turn the manual wheels." Elara looked at the tanks. They were controlled by the new hydraulic system she had helped approve. "They aren't jammed," she realized. "They're locked out." Someone engaged the emergency override to prevent the water from flowing. Sabotage. "Give me a wrench," Elara commanded. "Your Grace?" "Give me a bloody wrench." She grabbed a heavy iron tool from a stunned worker. She ran not toward the fire, but toward the pump house. It was surrounded by steam, hissing violently. She found the override valve. It was rusted tight. No, it had been welded shut. "Recently. Help me," she screamed to McGregor. "Break this seal." Together, the Duchess and the foreman slammed the heavy wrench against the sabotage weld. Once, twice. Sparks flew. On the third strike, the metal sheared. Elara threw her weight against the wheel, screaming with the effort. It turned. A massive whoosh echoed as thousands of gallons of water surged through the pipes. The fire hoses on the line suddenly kicked to life, blasting high-pressure streams into the heart of the inferno. The steam that rose was blinding, but the water was winning. Elara stood panting, her hands blistered, her strange clothes soaked. She stared at the black maw of the warehouse door. "Come out," she whispered. "Come out, you stubborn wolf." Minutes dragged like hours. Then a shadow emerged from the smoke. 2 men were dragging a third. They were coughing, stumbling. Elara ran forward. It was Sebastian. He was unrecognizable. His coat was burned away. His skin was blackened. He wasn't moving. "Get him to the carriage," Elara ordered, her voice cutting through the panic. "Now, and send for Dr. Aris. No one else. Just Aris." They loaded his unconscious body onto a flatbed wagon. Elara climbed up beside him, taking his hand. It was limp. His breathing was shallow, a terrible rattling sound in his chest. As the wagon lurched away, Elara looked back at the crowd. Standing near the edge of the police line, watching the chaos with a look of detached curiosity, was a man in a carriage. Lord Harrington. He tipped his hat to her. Elara didn't blink. She didn't cry. She felt something inside her harden, transforming from flesh into the very steel her husband manufactured. Sebastian was down. The wolf was fallen. The world thought the Westbury Empire was vulnerable. They thought they could pick the carcass clean while the master lay dying. They thought the plain sister would crumble, weep, and beg for help. Elara looked down at Sebastian's face. She wiped a smudge of ash from his cheek. "Rest now," she whispered to him. "I have the watch." She turned her face toward London. The tears were gone. The pretty one had played her games in the ballroom. The rival had played his games with fire. Now they would see what the rejected sister could do. Back at Thorne House, the servants gasped as Elara marched in, covered in soot, looking like a demon of the industrial age. "Prepare the master's room," she barked. "Boil water, lots of it, and bring me the ledgers." "The ledgers, Your Grace," the housekeeper stammered. "Now?" "Yes," Elara said, stopping at the foot of the stairs. "Lord Harrington thinks he can crash our stock by morning. He thinks the Duke is dead." She turned, her eyes blazing with a terrifying light. "I am going to bankrupt him before breakfast." Dawn broke over a London that believed the Duke of Westbury was dead. In the library of Thorne House, the lamps were still burning. Elara had not slept. She sat at Sebastian's massive oak desk, the ticker tape from the telegraph machine piling up like paper serpents at her feet. "Lord Harrington is shorting the stock," Mr. Finch, the solicitor, said, his voice trembling. "He is betting the company will collapse by noon. If the price drops another point, the banks will foreclose." Elara fingered the heavy iron key around her neck. She didn't look like a scared girl from the country anymore. She looked like a general. "He is betting on a corpse," she said coldly. "But the wolf is still breathing. Use the emergency reserves. Buy every share that hits the floor. We are going to squeeze him until he breaks." By midday the tide turned. Elara's aggressive buying forced the price up, triggering a panic. Lord Harrington, caught in his own trap, was insolvent before lunch. Elara had fought with ink and gold, and she had won. She slumped back in the chair, exhausted, but a commotion in the foyer made her straighten. "Let me through! I am family!" Isabella burst in, dressed in premature mourning black. She looked beautiful and tragic, a perfect performance. "Elara, I came as soon as I heard. Is he gone?" "He is alive," Elara said, standing at the base of the grand staircase to block the way. "Thank heavens," Isabella sighed, adjusting her veil. "I must see him. He needs comfort. He needs beauty to give him strength. Not a ledger keeper." She took a step up. "Step aside, Elara. We both know who he really wanted that night. He settled for you to pay a debt. Now that he is weak, he will want the pretty one." Elara didn't flinch. She caught Isabella's wrist in a grip of steel. "Listen to me," Elara's voice was low and dangerous. He did not settle. He invested. I just bankrupted a lord, saved 1,000 jobs, and preserved this legacy while you were picking out a funeral dress. You are a flower, Isabella. Pretty to look at, but you wilt in the heat. I am the earth that holds the house up. She shoved Isabella's hand away. Go home, before I buy the mortgage on father's house and evict you into the snow. Terrified by the power radiating from her plain sister, Isabella fled. Elara leaned against the banister, her knees finally shaking. Elara. The rasp came from the top of the stairs. Sebastian stood there, bandaged and swaying, holding on to the wall. Sebastian! She ran up, catching him as he buckled. They sank to the floor together. You shouldn't be moving, she sobbed. I had to see her, he whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek with a bandaged hand. The woman who saved my empire. I heard you, Elara. I heard you roar. I was harsh, she murmured. You were magnificent, he corrected. He pressed his forehead against hers. Your father said, take the pretty one. He didn't know that I don't like diamonds. They are cold. I chose the fire. I chose the partner. I love you, Elara whispered, the truth finally spoken. And I love you, the Wolf of Westbury replied, kissing his wife. My equal. My life. In the end, Lord Archibald died penniless, still boasting about a fortune that no longer existed. Isabella married a minor merchant, who went bald in a year and tired of her tantrums in 2. They spent their lives looking at the gates of Thorne House, forever locked out. But inside those gates, a legend was written. Elara and Sebastian Thorne didn't just build trains. They built a dynasty. They say the Duchess of Westbury never wore jewels, save for a simple iron key on a silver chain. She didn't need them. She shone with a brilliance that time could not dim, the brilliance of a woman who knew her own worth. It is a reminder to us all. The world will try to tell you that your value lies in your reflection. But beauty fades. Character is eternal. Do not strive to be the pretty one who is chosen for a shelf. Strive to be the fierce one, the smart one, the one who can walk through fire and come out holding the water. Be the one who saves yourself. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and karma, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more dramatic stories every week. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching.